Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good morning and afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Barb Tassa. I'm one of the managers here on the Desk team, helping customers make the move from Desk to Service Cloud. And I just wanted to welcome you all here today. So welcome, and we'll get started in just 1 second while we wait for a few more folks to arrive. So just hang on for 1 minute. Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining us today on this masterclass for moving your data on data migration, for moving your data from Desk over to Service Cloud. So quick introductions. My name again is Barb Tassa. I'm a manager here on the Desk team, and what we really do is help our customers make the move from Desk over to Service Cloud. And on the line with me, I have my colleague, John Cabrera. John, can you give a quick intro of what you do? Hey, John, can you hear me? Okay, maybe John is still muted, but we will get back to him today. So John is going to be a colleague of mine on the line today, helping us answer any questions that come in. If you haven't yet been to a GoToWebinar presentation, a couple navigation things. There is a chat window in your GoToWebinar control panel. So that's where you can type any questions or add any notes that you want for us to see. At the end, we will, of course, take questions from everybody here. So I do want to let you know that we'll have plenty of time for Q&A today. Usually everybody asks me, hey, Barb, can you make sure you send the resources? And the answer is absolutely. We will share all of the resources. I've actually already put the slides in the chat. If you want to keep those, that's fantastic. You can have that. And then we'll talk about what all these things are as well. And then I do want to say thank you for joining us today. I know this is a bit of a longer session than we normally have. The master classes usually run almost an hour and a half. And so I do want to thank you for taking the time today. to spend it with us and learn how to make the move from Desk to Service Cloud. And so we definitely want to make this worth your time. So we would love to see lots of engagement, ask questions at any point. We'll try to call out those questions as much as possible to make sure it's a fantastic learning experience for everybody. All right, and then what does the agenda actually look like for today? So we'll kind of give you a high-level overview of what it means to make the move from Desk to Service Cloud from a data migration point of view. We'll actually go ahead, launch a Service Cloud trial org, and run through the data migration from start to finish. Then we'll talk about what it's like to make the move for data migration to an existing Salesforce instance. We'll talk about cutover considerations. So when you're actually ready to start providing customer support in Service Cloud, what are the things that you should be thinking about? And then we'll leave lots of time for Q&A at the end. But as I said, this session really is for your learning benefit. So we want to make sure any questions that you have, bring them up and we'll try to address them if it's appropriate for the slide we're at, or maybe a little bit later when we get to that component. So my goals really here for today are firstly to enable everybody here to run the data migration tool successfully. So if we do that, I will be very happy and hopefully you guys as well. Second, our goal is to provide you with an actionable overview of how to move your data from Desk to Service Cloud. Perhaps you're not ready to do it today, but we want to empower you to do that in the near future. And then third, provide you with clear troubleshooting steps if needed. The reason we bring that up is sometimes things feel like they're not working correctly. So I want to give you guys all the power to know, how to solve certain things that may come up, and some things will come up, versus when you should reach out to us because those are errors that maybe you can't fix, or a simple browser refresh won't help. All right, and so let's do a quick poll today. So I see on the line today, Alyssa, Chad, Nikolai, 3 Tims, and Wes. But I'm really curious, are you guys moving into an existing Salesforce org or into a new Salesforce org? So I'm going to launch a quick poll here to learn more about that. So if you guys can take a quick second and to give me your feedback. Are you moving into a new Salesforce org, and that would be the Service Cloud trial org, or into an existing Salesforce org? Okay, so we'll give it one more second. And okay, Wes, I see you have a question. You will defer to Chad. Okay, so Chad, please answer for Wes. All right. So let me go ahead and close this poll then. Thank you very much for answering. So it looks like we're about 50-50. Some of you guys are moving into a new Salesforce org, some to an existing. So that is good to know. All right, and then what kind of data are you guys looking to migrate? So in Desk, you have a couple of different options. We have case-related data. That means when your customer emails you in, it's anything related to that case, their contact info. Then we have also support centers or knowledge bases. So some of you guys may be using. So is it just that, or is it a combination of all of them? So quick poll here. What kind of data are you looking to move? All of them, Nikolai. Great. So you can hit that both case and article data. Thank you for that. All right. And okay. So it looks like everyone has a combination of cases and articles. So that's fantastic. We'll definitely cover that. All right, and so how we're going to approach this. So on the left-hand side, we'll kind of go through all these details. In the trial org, we'll talk about where you can actually find the data migration tool. It's maybe a secret or maybe not. Maybe you've already discovered it, but it's actually built right into your Salesforce org. How to open and run the tool, how to do a case data migration, how to know that you've actually succeeded, and then what to do if it doesn't succeed, what are the troubleshooting steps. We'll look at the article data migration. And also, if you guys are using communities, we'll walk you through the initial steps of where to actually enable your community and then how to know if you've succeeded. So all of this stuff is going to be relevant for everybody that's using the trial org, but also if you're moving into an existing Salesforce org. So it's good to know how those things work there. And then when we go into the existing Salesforce org, we'll talk about the extra steps that you guys have to take, most likely. One is talking about sandboxes. So typically, if you have an existing Salesforce org and you have a lot of customizations there already, you'll want to start in a sandbox rather than the production. We'll talk about how to install the tool because it's not going to be pre-installed in an existing Salesforce org. We'll talk a little bit about permissions that are related to running the tool, checking data, installing the tool, and then how to revert any imported data. And then lastly, we'll talk about best practices in running the data migration tool and then cutovers as well. So hopefully this looks like a good agenda to you guys. If there's anything else that you want us to cover related to data migration that you don't see on this list today, please ask us questions. Okay, and just to level set everybody, what do I mean when I talk about the customized Salesforce Service Cloud trial? And this is the link that will take you there. So I'm just going to show you guys in case you don't know what this is yet. So this is the 90-day trial that is free for you guys to use. You can create a number of these trial orgs. It will give you a new Salesforce customized Service Cloud instance, and you can use this truly as a testing ground where you try things out, or you just figure out how things work, and you can throw that away if you don't want to use it. But if you're happy with your configuration and that's what you want to move all of your support team into from desk, these can also be converted into production, and that's usually the most common thing. People will set things up in their trial org and then go live in that particular org. Okay, so that's that. Let's go back into the presentation here. And so now we're going to jump right in. After you've created the trial org, let's talk about getting actually to the data migration tool. So I'm going to log into my Service Cloud trial org here. And depending on if you've just created it or if you've had it for a little bit, it may look a little bit different. But either way, all of us are going to have this thing called the app launcher, which is that 3x3 little waffle looking icon in the top left. And when we click the app launcher, it's going to take us to this page where there's different applications, so to speak, or tools that have been built into a Salesforce instance. And then one of them should be called the Desk Migration Wizard. So if you were in the trial org, this is what you should see. So when you click into the Migration Wizard, let's wait for it to load a little bit here. All right, so let me just go back. Okay, so when I first land on the Desk Migration Wizard, I will see a couple of different things. I will see I have two options, one for article migration and then one for case migration. And I will see this thing called the pre-flight check, which has, for me right now, a bunch of green checkboxes. So typically when you are working in a trial org, these are always almost always green, as long as you are the person that actually created the trial org and you're going to be installing the tool. If you don't see specific green checkboxes, let us know, but they're all solvable. So basically you need to make sure you have the right permissions. There's a support article that you can access through this documentation link that will walk you through exactly how to create all these permissions if by chance you don't have them. You're more likely to see some red X's here instead of green checkboxes if you're moving into an existing Salesforce org, and we'll talk about that when we get to that component. But for now, most of us should see a bunch of green checkboxes. All right, and then if I'm going to go first to case migration, let's click on there. Okay. Guess I have to hit continue. Here we go. All right, so the next thing is going to ask me to do is give me the desk.com endpoint. So this is my current Salesforce or desk.com site that I use. And just so you can verify, you can always log into your desk site and just check the URL in the browser, copy that, and put that into your link here. So that's all it is. If you Don't know what it is, again, just go into your Salesforce site, grab the URL bar. After that, what I typically recommend is actually being logged into your desk environment, which will make the authentication step that much faster. So I've done that. I've logged into desk.com already. And all I'm going to do is just hit this authenticate desk button. I may get some pop-ups. I may get some errors. Sometimes if I don't have pop-ups enabled on my browser, it'll give me a little warning in the browser bar. So it's just a matter of going through and allowing pop-ups so it can authenticate my site. Next, I'm going to go through these boxes here. I'm just going to go top down: users, groups, accounts, contacts, and cases. So those are all of the desk objects, so to speak, where data is stored in my desk site. So just as a refresher, if I go into my desk site, team would be the users. So that's what I see here when I look at users, and groups. Accounts and contacts are going to be created when customers actually email me. And then cases are just what you think they are. They're the actual cases when you go into your agent console of all the things that people have emailed you and have created cases. So those are all my cases here. So that's how the data migration works. We'll just go one after the other and map everything from desk over to Salesforce. So first, when we start with users, Salesforce is going to give us a couple of options of what profiles we want to migrate this into. And a Salesforce profile may seem a little bit kind of overwhelming initially, but just know the two most common things: system administrator. So that's for the person that's going to be kind of like the desk billing admin or the desk admin, who has rights for every single part of the Salesforce org. And then you have something called a standard user or support agent. So I typically run the tool and then just use standard user. I can always change this in the background. So I've actually run the tool once before, and so it's already going to be mapping these individuals into existing users. If you're running this for the first time, it'll just basically create it for the first time. And this means you can run the tool multiple times. It's not going to duplicate any of your contacts. It's not going to duplicate any of your users. It's just going to find a match and update them if you already have anybody in your Salesforce org, like I do because I've run the tool just once before. And there's a couple of interesting call outs here. So my active users are the actual current licensed users in desk. So I only have those 2 users, but I have a bunch of deleted users. And that's maybe a little bit strange, but those are all of the previous users you had in your desk.com site that Salesforce is actually going to bring over, because we want to make sure that you retain the case history of who actually worked on the case from your side. So that's why you'll see deleted users come over. They're not going to be charged against your account. It's just for basically data purposes. So once you have mapped everything on the user side, we'll go to the groups. Again, everything is sort of finding an auto match here in the groups. Accounts, I'll go through here, select the account layout, and then make sure that everything is going to be mapping. So here, for some reason, it didn't find a map. So all I do is just go through, click to map these words with what I see here: external ID, plan. Okay. And then I'm going to have to check some custom fields here as well. And then for contacts, again, sometimes it doesn't find a match right away. Created at, we'll go ahead and match all these. Updated at, external ID, background, language, access to private portal, access to company cases, and a time zone. And then I'm just going to go ahead and map all these custom field values as well. Okay, so there we go. And now on to cases. And then when you're running the data migration tool for the first time, you're going to want to choose migrate all data typically. So this will bring every single case over from desk.com regardless of when it was created. If I'm running this again in the future, and let's say it's a week after I ran it the first time, I probably will not use migrate all data, but I'll use what's called filter by modified date. So that will allow me to pick up any new cases that were created since that first time I ran the data migration tool and capture any cases that had updates to it, whether it's customer emails or notes from my support reps. So right now I'll just do migrate all data. And then I do have options that we'll talk about a little bit later. These are more advanced, but just choose what the defaults are. If you have multiple case layouts, you'll know sort of which ones you want to choose. But if you haven't broached that subject yet, just choose the standard options here like I have. Description, let's map that over. So a couple things weren't mapped. So I'll go ahead and finish that. External ID. Most of the time you don't have to do this, but sometimes the tool will actually ask you to do that. Okay, a couple more. Opened at, first resolved at, event type. And I have a couple more custom fields in here. You guys can see that in this one, I have some bike-related custom fields, contact reason. Oh, that's the wrong one. Contact reason. Here we go. That's new products.
Hey, Barbara.
Oh, hey, John. How's it going?
Hey, I'm sorry I had an audio problem a little bit earlier, muting issue.
Nope.
Typical muting issue.
Nope.
I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm with Barbara here today and I work in tech support. So if you have any follow-up issues, you can always email me or let me know after the webinar if you want me to open a case for you to take a closer look at your specific migration. I see Barbara is doing a migration a second time, as you can see here. I just spun up a brand new trial org this morning, so I don't know if it's worth the time to repeat these steps to show you what it is to do it on a new org. But it's up to you, Barbara, if we have the time.
Thanks, John. Okay, so once I've gone through and mapped all these fields, I can see I've basically gone users, groups, accounts, contacts, and cases. Everything is mapped over, and then I would just start clicking the Start Migration button. You'll get this really scary warning button, but basically it says we're going to bring the desk data over to Salesforce. We're going to try to match. So if you're comfortable with that, accept and start migration. So that's the start of the data migration. Now, you'll probably see this kind of little wheel that's running. And I want to say that depending on the size of your case volume in desk, the migration is going to run either very quickly, meaning like, let's say if you have less than 10,000 cases, it may finish within the hour. If you have 500,000 cases, it can take a couple of days. So what's basically happening in the background here is the migration tool is pinging the desk API and asking for cases from your desk site and then creating those records for you in Salesforce. So the more cases, the more interactions per case you have, the longer it's going to take. But what you will know is if this looks like this running, that's a good sign. If you don't have a lot of cases and it's still running a day out, then maybe something went wrong. You can always retry. You can stop the migration and you can redo it. But if you're still not having any luck, please contact us and then we can help troubleshoot and we can see what's going on. So I'll let this run for a little bit and then just come to the presentation and talk about things that can go wrong. So a couple of things that are common is one is the desk site authentication. So if for some reason you're trying to start the migration when you put in your URL and it's not letting you authenticate, could be a couple of things going on. One, like I did, just log into your desk site, refresh your browsers, so then it actually will be faster to authenticate. If that doesn't work, there is a manual way to actually put in your site keys, and we can kind of show that as soon as my migration finishes. If your tool is still running after a couple of days and you don't have a lot of cases, like I said, let's say you have less than 10,000 cases in desk and it's still running after a couple of days, maybe something went wrong. So you can definitely reach out to us. And then once your site actually finishes, you may have what are called failed records. And so let's look at what that is. So when the tool is running, it'll kind of have that spinning thing and it'll show you for each of the objects how many records were downloaded, how many were migrated, and if there's any records that were failed. So these are going to be blue hyperlinks, so you can actually click into it and see which specific records failed. Sometimes you will have some records fail, and the most common reasons are, for example, a customer email address being more than 40 characters, or attachments being, I believe, larger than 10 megabytes when you're pulling them over. So the desk attachments can be up to 25, but the migration tool will not be able to pull over cases that have attachments with more than 10 megabytes. So there are some cases where the tool may fail. And if that happens and you still really need the data, the simple solution is to contact our support team and request a full site export where we can get everything and send it to you in encrypted files. The downside of that is you would have to store that in your own server somewhere. So it's not something that will automatically be uploaded into your Salesforce org, but it will be data that you will have on hand. So that's just like a quick FYI for that. And then in terms of, let's log back in here. Yeah, so if you see errors, this is kind of what it's going to look like. It'll have a couple of notes here, say done with errors. So you can always hit that retry button. Sometimes it'll actually retry automatically for you. And then if you do see an error, you can explore the errors. And then if everything fails and you're like, hey, this is not working, what's going on? Please contact us, email us, support@desk.com. And then in order for us to be able to actually see what's going on in your Salesforce org, you'll have to do something called grant login access. So when you log into Salesforce, you go to the top right on this little avatar icon, and there'll be a settings there. And then when you go into the settings, you'll see an option called grant account login access. And then you want to grant access to both salesforce.com support and the desk migration wizard support. So those are just a couple of little tips for troubleshooting. So let me go back into my site and see how we did. Okay, so here we go. Looks like my migration is done, but it has some errors. So let's go explore those errors. So these are the ones that were failed records. So if I click on that, I should be able to see what failed, and we can figure out why. So it looks like the interaction type is a chat message. So for some reason, these chat messages failed. So here the error is no matching user found. So that could be, that is one issue that we can, of course, help fix for you guys, but the errors are going to be different for each of the sites. So that is pretty common to have some kind of errors. And then depending on what type of error it is, we can figure out the solution for you. Now, I do want to pause here and stop for any questions, since I did cover just a lot of ground right now with how to run the tool and what to do. Do you guys have any questions at this point that you want me to cover? Okay, so I don't see any questions right now, but if you think of any, please let us know, and then we can actually try. If you guys have questions at the end, we can see what's going on in your org as well. Okay, so now, assuming that all worked perfectly, which sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't, just to be completely realistic, let's talk about what it's going to be like if you're moving into an existing Salesforce org. Okay, so before you actually start the data migration tool, there are a few prerequisites for running the tool in existing orgs that we want you to be aware of. So just off the top, please involve your current Salesforce admin. So if you're an existing Salesforce user, you probably have somebody that holds the keys to your Salesforce org, and they hold those keys tight because they want to make sure the Salesforce org is working for all of their users. So definitely get them involved if you are not the Salesforce admin. And then generally what we do recommend is for customers to work in the sandbox first. So a sandbox is basically a copy of your production instance, but any changes you make into your sandbox, a partial sandbox, there's partial sandboxes, there's developer sandboxes. So anything that you do in the sandbox doesn't affect your users that are using the production org. So good practices is to build out things in the sandbox first. And then to specifically use the tool, there are a couple of prerequisites. For the very first one, a feature called My Domain needs to be enabled. So your desk site should look something like this. For us, it would be desk.mysalesforce.com, and it shouldn't be something like na35.salesforce.com. So this is where My Domain has been enabled versus this is where it's not. So the tool will not work if that is not enabled. So please do that for the first time. If you're just starting to make the move, you may not have knowledge licenses. So that's one thing that you want to get checked off. So in order to get your knowledge licenses, you'll need to have the contractual swap completed. And then as part of your one-to-one package pricing, you get those knowledge licenses included. So as long as you have actually signed the Desk to Service Cloud swap contract, you should have the knowledge licenses enabled. If you're trying to do this before the swap and you don't currently have knowledge licenses, then you may not have this enabled. So just make sure you do have knowledge licenses. Third, you want to have enough storage room. So depending on what you have going on in your current Salesforce org, you may be at capacity or close to capacity. And then if you're going to run the data migration, it's may not work because you just don't have anywhere to put that data. So that's something to check beforehand, and we'll show how to find that number. You want to have the system administrator profile. So we briefly touched on profiles, but the system administrator profile is the one user role that you need in order to be able to install anything. And then lastly, something called content deliveries, which requires a Salesforce support ticket. So usually these are actually enabled, but if you get an error that says, hey, we can't install the tool because you don't have content deliveries enabled, then that's something that will prevent you from using the tool. We also have a guide for existing Salesforce org data migration and configuration that you can please follow at your leisure when you do start this, because it can be a little bit of a tricky process for existing orgs, and we want to make sure you guys are all successful at that. So with that, we will basically walk through the same thing, but on the existing Salesforce org side. And the first thing that I'm going to do is point you guys to this definitive guide of using the migration wizard. And this article, if you click on the other tab, will take you step by step to actually use the migration tool in an existing org. So I'll just start for the first part of it. Let me go into an org. So in this case, I would consider this current Salesforce org that I just tested. It's kind of like an existing org because I already have some data in there. I do have the migration tool already installed, but I can actually install a newer version. So I'll just show you how to do that. So in order to install the data migration tool, it's fairly straightforward. I'm just going to copy this URL from /packaging to the long alphanumeric number. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go into my Salesforce org and delete the rest of the URL after .com and paste in that link for packaging and press enter. So this is how you install packages into Salesforce in general. So right now it's going to ask me to upgrade since I already have it. If you have not had it before, it'll say install. So I'm going to install for admins only, and I'm going to upgrade. And this tells me that I'm basically updating to version 4.0. So I'll go ahead and upgrade. This typically just takes 1 or 2 minutes. It's a fairly fast install. And once it's installed, we can confirm what version of the desk migration tool we have by going into our system setup area. So I'll give this a second or two to run, and I'll usually get an email as well once it's completed. And out of curiosity, for those of you who have said that you are actually moving into an existing Salesforce org, have you tried already starting the data migration process and if it has some errors, or is this brand new to you right now? Haven't tried yet. Okay, cool, Tim. Thank you for letting me know. All right, so here we go. So it's installed it. And there is the article we talked about before. For now, I'm just going to say done, and then we'll go look at the tool. Okay, so it'll take me to this page that I can actually navigate to myself as well by going into the setup icon and then in the quick find looking for install packages. So then this is all of the packages that have been installed, including the desk migration wizard. And I can see that the version number is 4.0. So if you've also started using a trial org from even a couple of weeks ago, when you come here and you look at which installed version you have, it's probably not going to be 4.0. So our technical consulting team who owns this data migration wizard, they're constantly releasing new updates and patches to make the data migration smoother and smoother. So if you have started a trial org from a few weeks ago, you actually may want to go through the exact same steps that I did of installing this migration and upgrading your current migration tool to 4.0, which is the current tool. All right, so now that I've gone through the migration, basically, if I have all those permissions, it should be fairly straightforward, and I can go back into the app launcher, and I basically click on the same migration wizard. I'll go through the process again, and let's see if we can actually fix those errors that we had the first time. So let's just finish done. I'm gonna just complete this. Let's rerun it. Okay, for cases, pre-flight check is green. I'll hit continue. I have my desk site here. I'm gonna hit authorize desk. And it's gonna take me back into the screen here. So it'll take a couple of seconds to load up. So I'll start with my users. And again, this is where I see that profile list. So I'll just go for standard user. I have my users mapped. Then I'm gonna hit groups. My groups are mapped. And these I can always delete later. Accounts, I'm gonna select the account layout. My custom fields are mapped. I'll go to contacts, click contact layout. So I can see most of my fields are mapped. And then down to cases. And this is where I can do the select the data set. Because I had errors in my instance, I'm actually just going to try to migrate all data again and see if by chance it'll correct those and actually pull over those chat windows. But if not, then it'll be good to know as well. Case layout, and then I go look down the list. Looks like everything is still correctly mapped. So that looks good. And then at that point, I have mapped all of the different objects and I can hit start migration. So Nikolai, I see you have a question. Is this a two-step process if we want cases and knowledge base articles imported? Must we wait for cases to import all the knowledge base articles too? Yep, so you do have to run this twice, and we'll go through that in just 1 second. So at this point, everything looks good. I'm gonna hit start migration, accept and start migration again. And so this will take a few seconds. I'm getting an internal server error, so that does happen. Let's give it another try. Let's give that a try again. Okay, new. Okay. Hey, John, I know you've been recently running the new.
Yep, I'm here.
Well, have you got those server errors as well?
Yes, it is a known issue.
Okay.
And so you're going to run into little bumps like this along the way. You may or may not run into little issues like this. So now it looks like Barbara is stuck. Mm-hmm. What would you do from here, Barbara?
Yeah, so what I would probably try, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're probably the tool expert at this point, but I'm going to go back and I'm trying to force the start of the tool. So let me see. Do that. Just go back to the main URL. Troubleshooting.
What happens if to interject for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
The Lightning interface does relies heavily on the browser's capacity to do caching. So you might still have the older migration wizard cached in the browser, and the best way to ensure that you're using the newest functionality is just to do a quick simple log off of Salesforce, and then log back in again, and you might notice even the graphics have changed from one migration tool to the next. Like even this page you're looking at here, that looks like an older version to me.
Oh, it does. Okay. See, that's good to know.
It does. So I bet you, can you do a quick log off and log back in? Would that be inconvenient?
No, let's go for it.
I wonder if that would help.
This is fantastic.
This is a common, quick log off.
Okay.
Common troubleshooting tips that I use all the time.
Great. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. I'll go back. So you think this is still the old?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, let's give it a try and see if it steps through. But if not, then we'll have to try again.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. So this is.
So I'll do a lot of refreshing. You know, even a hard refresh, like doing a Control F5 on the PC will bypass the caching and make sure it downloads all the new elements.
Okay.
So there's a couple of hard refreshing is a common tool that I use a lot.
Okay.
With the Lightning experience.
Great. I'll step through this right now and see if it allows me to go forward. But if not, then we'll just do all that that you just suggested, John.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's everything.
The auto mapping is nice. Saves a lot of time.
Yes.
Yep.
So let's see. I do see the little thing. No, internal server error. Okay.
So this is documented by our team, and a couple of cases have come in yesterday, the past couple of days, and this morning with screenshots explaining the issue. And there is a setting and setup that we can change if you want to do that right now. I don't know if that's in scope or not.
Let's do it. Let's see if we can.
Okay, so sure. Let's go into setup.
Okay.
Go under setup.
Yep.
Yep, and then in the quick find box, you'll type in custom settings.
Custom settings.
Yes, please.
Everyone's getting a front row seat to John's mastery of.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot going on under the hood. So we're going to click Manage here.
Great.
And then we're going to Edit.
Okay, great. Custom settings, Manage, and then Edit.
Yes. So on this page, we have a lot of the, these are the settings that Apex uses in its batching. So it'll grab 50 articles at a time. It'll fetch certain batches in specific sizes over the API online. To fix this specific issue with the pop-up internal error, it's very vague. Just change migration monitor delay time from a 2 to a 1. And that is the recommended fix.
Okay, and
change that from a 2 to a 1 and save.
Got it. Okay, and then do I just go back and then try to run the tool again?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't see you do it. I don't know if there was a delay on the go through.
I did. Let me just double check. So custom settings, migration.
Yep, still there.
And then.
Okay, I see it now. I guess you were fast.
Is 1.
That's right. That looks good. So from here, you can just jump straight to the app launcher and try it again.
Okay, let's give it a go. So click on the app launcher, come back to the desk migration wizard, and let's see how we do this time. Okay, so it's starting me off here. Let's click authorize desk. Okay, I'm back to my favorite screen with the mappings. So I'll give it a second. Just go through the standard user. Okay, everyone's.
Third time's the charm.
Let's hope so. Okay, group accounts. Let's do that account layout. Contacts. Let's do the contact layout. Well, the good news is everybody's seeing this a number of times, so you guys are all going to be experts on how to run the data migration tool, and you can teach everybody else. There we go. Okay, It's mapped. All right, John, crossing my fingers here. Start migration.
Me too.
Accept
Okay.
start migration. What are we going to get now? Okay.
Well, hopefully we get the spinner and a good message. Yes.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think I would call that a good message.
We started migrating your data. Well, thank you. That's highly appreciated. So there we go. This is definitely a perfect example of some of the things that we do come up against. So while this actually runs, let me go and add that as a troubleshooting step. That is something comes up. Because I think you guys will appreciate having that in case it does come up. So what we had was the server error. And then to fix, go to setup. And what was it called, John?
Custom settings,
Mm-hmm.
and then manage, and then edit. And then finally, the last item was I'll retrieve it for you. It was
I can go look it up.
migration monitor delay time. Adjust the migration monitor delay time to 1. Save and return to the wizard and try again. Yeah. So I can share that with you.
There we go.
Here.
There we go. Okay, great. So now that's done. We'll put that in here, and then we've all learned something.
This is unique. This is brand new. So the bugs are being fixed and enhancements are being created, and then it's not a perfect science, but occasionally there will be a small new bug to be introduced, and then typically there is a quick solution to it. So we just saw how easy it was to fix it with the recommendation that our team provides. So they're very good at updating the tool and keeping us up to date on the issues.
Absolutely. And it looks like the tool did finish for me. So the status is done. I can see the records downloaded, the records migrated, and this time rerunning the tool actually fixed everything. So it was able to bring over all of my cases, my interactions, and then I can see in this log here all of the things that it fetched. So this is hopefully the success screen that you're going to get. But like John said, this is a work in progress. So if you guys do get any errors, try some of the refreshes, try the setting of the migration tool fields. Let me just see where I documented that. Here it was. The custom settings. If that doesn't work, then please contact our support team, and John and our team can help you guys figure that out. Because once you do bring everything over, and then you're pretty much done. So that's basically how to run the tool, and that's for the case side. And so Nikolai, to walk through how to do things for the article side, let's go do that right now. So just to kind of show you what it is in Desk. So in Desk, on the Content tab, if you have articles, it'll look like this. Maybe you'll have some articles. In my case, I have bike maintenance articles. So let me just show you guys my support center, and that way we'll try to make sure that we have everything come over properly. So right now, this is just my demo support center on Desk. And then if I click into an article, it'll just have some text here. So let's go and try to use the tool to bring over our articles. So I go to the same place. I go to the app launcher. I click the Desk Migration Wizard. And then when I go to the Desk Migration Wizard, I will have those two options again, the article migration and the case migration. So this is that two-step process, Nikolai, you were asking about. So I'm now going to click article migration. Likewise, I should see all green checkboxes. I'm going to hit continue. The same steps, I'm going to authenticate and authorize Desk. This time when it loads up my page, I should have a couple of different options. In this case, I shouldn't see all those users. I will just see articles and then translations if I have any. So I'll click on the articles. In the same way, I'm going to use the knowledge layout. So just unless you're doing advanced setup in Service Cloud, you'll just probably have that one option. And then likewise, I have the mapping that I'll do just like I did for cases. So this time is going to have all those fields from desk. So it's going to create those new fields for me because they don't exist right now. And then for translations, what I'll do is, I think I can actually just force this through and that should be fine. So I'm going to hit start migration, accept and start migration, and it should pull everything over fairly quickly because I only have just a handful of articles. So likewise here, it'll give me a message on how we're doing. So far, so good. We have a success message that the migration has started. And then there we go. I only had 4 articles. Oh, I guess I have a couple more, 8 articles, maybe a little bit more. It's still running. Let's see. Have some attachments. Okay, a little bit more. I think it's still running.
Looking good.
Yeah, so far good. There we go. It's done. So there we go. Everything migrated over successfully and no errors. Again, if you did have errors, you can click on these records and you can see which records failed. So then let's go check out what everything looks like. I'm going to go into the service console. Go ahead.
Isn't there a limit of 8 megabytes, Barbara? If you have a large attachment?
Yeah. So
you might see an error message. The limitation is 8, I believe.
Okay.
The file size.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are file size limitations for the tool specifically. And again, if you have articles or cases that have big file attachments, you can still export those out. You can contact our support team and then we can run a site export for you so you have those. But if you have a lot of them, and it will be a bit of a manual process to like get them back uploaded into Service Cloud. For most of those attachments, they should come over relatively easily, but if they are large, then just keep that in mind. It will fail. Okay, so to check everything, so if I go into my service console, I'm just going to go to cases and go to all cases. So I should see all of the cases that I had in desk come over into my Service Cloud environment. So if I click on the case number, it's a little bit different if you're navigating between desk and Service Cloud. In Service Cloud, you do have to click on the specific object. So if I click on the case number, it takes me to the case. If I click on the contact name, it just takes me to that person's contact record. In my case, I want to click on the case number here. And then that way I can see all of that information that came over from desk. So here, I don't have a lot of interactions, but if I did, they'd be here. And then on the details tab, that's where I would see any custom fields or desk labels that were brought over from the migration tool. So that way, all of my information is there. Okay, and then if you also want to verify, you can just do a couple of spot checks. You can look up the case that you have here in desk and then just make sure that all of the information came over correctly. The other thing, let's go check out our environment here. In desk, we have what are called filters that help you organize the cases by maybe the issue type or who they're assigned to. And the equivalent of that in Salesforce is called list views. So you'll see them here. So groups and filters will create list views. So in my case, I've got a lot of list views here. So I can actually go through and delete all of these ones that I don't want. But I can always create more and then manage them after I've run the migration. But the way that the tool works is that any groups that you have will create a queue and a list view, and then any actually filters you have, they'll come over as well. So you can always delete them later, but it'll just basically try to copy everything over for you. And then you may see sort of extra stuff that you don't need. You can always delete that. So I can always click on a list view, and there's this little gear icon here on the list view specifically, and I can hit delete and then delete all that. So that's how I get rid of some extra stuff that comes over in the migration. And lastly, to check to see how my articles came over, right now I'm on the Cases tab. So I'm going to click on this Knowledge drop down here. I'm going to move from Recently Viewed to Published Articles. And here we go. So here are all of my published articles that came over from Desk. So the one that we looked at here was Base Cycles Maintenance Guidelines. So I'll just go back here. Let's look at Maintenance Guidelines. So when I open up that article, all of my information that I had in the body is pulled over. So that is good. And then I can see when it was actually created and all that information about it. Okay, so that is the knowledge base. And in order to actually surface this externally, so right now all I did was just copy the data over. The articles have come over, but they're just internal to me right now. So there's no automatic support center that's created out of the box, but we have a really, really great walkthrough that will enable me to show that to the public. So I'm going to walk you through how to do that because it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go into this top right gear icon, and I'm going to this time click on what's called Service Setup. So we have a couple of different options here. Setup is going to allow you to change everything in Salesforce. Service Setup is going to be a more specific setup area just for support functionality, including our support center. So we have these walkthroughs here, and I'm just going to click this View All button. Okay, I should get a pop-up. Okay, 1 second. Here we go. So I'm going to click on this Setup filter just to reduce things. So these are kind of like easier ways to set things up rather than going to the Salesforce backend. But it's good to get familiar with how to set things up, whether it's using a walkthrough or just generally using the setup area. The one thing that I definitely recommend that you guys use is the setup flows, these wizards, these walkthroughs for setting up the community, because it takes care of all of the backend stuff for you. And when you do come here, there's one choice that you have to make first, because we have two slightly different options for how you want to surface your articles. So in Desk, if you have a support article or support center that looks like this, and you have a login button, that allows people to log in to your site. So you have to like authenticate somehow, whether it's something that you use with your own SAML login, maybe use Okta as the identity manager. If you do have a login button, that's a few extra steps, but in order to enable a support center that has that login functionality where people can log in to see their cases, then what you want to do is use, go back here, use this thing called the Lightning Community Setup. So that is a support center equivalent where you launch what's called a community, and that community has the ability to log in. Now, if you have a Desk support site that all you do is you show articles and perhaps you have a email us button that they would just fill out, this creates a case, and then that's it. Like, they don't log in to see their cases. You're just going to be communicating with your customer back and forth through email. That's a simpler version. And what you can do is set up this thing called the Help Center. So the Help Center is going to look very similar to the community once you've launched it. It's functionally pretty equivalent, except it doesn't have login functionality. So it's just going to allow me to surface the articles and have, for example, a contact form on there. So I'll just walk through this quickly so you guys can see what it looks like. So I'm just going to hit Start. It's going to ask me a couple of questions. And then usually within a couple minutes, I'll have a support center launched. I'll just call this my bike shop. If this URL is taken, it may give me a little error, but in this case, it's not. Let's just call this my help center. Let's say help. I'm going to click this publish my help center after completing my setup, just so we can surface this for now. And here's where it kind of goes through the back end. It sets up all of those required fields in the end that the wizard takes care of. So there's usually multiple ways to set things up in Salesforce, but I would say from a support center point of view, this is the way to go. It can save you a lot of time rather than clicking through things in the back end. All right, so this takes a couple of seconds, and then it's going to ask me about my desk articles. So I have these articles that were pulled over with a migration tool. So generally speaking, I do want to run this wizard after I've brought in my articles. So I'm going to just click events and bike maintenance. I don't need these other things. Some of those may be internal articles, so I just want to show the public facing ones. I'll click next. Who should actually have author ability to create articles. So these are the people that are in my site. So I'll just keep them in. I'll click next. All right, so let's go see what it looks like. So Salesforce has a few pre-built templates, and this one is going to launch, and it's not going to look like my actual branding, but all of this stuff is customizable. So you can step through these little walkthroughs, but for now I'm just going to dismiss them and give you just a verbal walkthrough. So this is what's called the builder. This is where you start editing your various community components. And today we just talked about the data migration, so I want to focus on that, but I don't want to go too much into actually how to change things here today, because I want to address any data migration questions. But just to see what it looks like, I'm going to click preview, and this would be sort of your customer-facing support center that you can edit, change pictures, change logos. But then if I click on the tiles, I should start seeing my support articles come up, and so there is a little bit of extra stuff that will show up out of the box, but I just want to show you that when we do migrate the articles, they'll first come in internally. Then if we enable our community, we can make them public facing, and all of these things can be managed and can be removed. And that is a topic for another day, and we'll send resources if you guys want to learn how to do that more. But for the data migration part, everything worked out. I was able to bring over my cases. I was able to bring over my articles, confirm that they came over in my Salesforce site, and hopefully that gives you guys a good overview of how to do that. So let me go back into the presentation here. And just to reiterate, so Tim, since you mentioned you're moving into an existing Salesforce site, when you start installing the migration tool, just make sure you review this checklist with your Salesforce admin so they know what's going on. When you first install the tool, you'll install that in the sandbox first, migrate the data, and then make sure everything looks okay. So there's some nuances of desk and how the data is created that regular Salesforce admins may just kind of have some questions about. So make sure you do everything in sandbox first. If everything looks good, you'll replicate that process. You'll install the migration tool into the production org. And in the production org, you do the exact same things that we did, install the tool, map the fields, it pulls all the data over. So this article here is a step-by-step guide that walks through all of the permissioning and everything else that you need to have. So this is typically the guide I actually have open when I'm doing anything in an existing org, just because there's a few small things I don't want to miss. If I miss one, the tool won't run. So just make sure you use this guide as you're walking through the tool. Okay, so now that everybody has had a lot of success, hopefully installing the tool, and you've done other configuration in your Salesforce instance, and you're getting close to having your team go live in your Service Cloud environment. So what are the things that you need to think about when it comes to data migration? So after you have run the data migration tool the first time, we typically recommend that you for the time being, don't delete things like queues or change the statuses of your cases or the support processes. And the reason is that the tool likes to map and find the same things that it ran the first time. And so if you delete sort of those big things, the tool may give you more errors than usual. So typically we say just don't delete the big things. You can rerun the tool when you have all your data, and then you can delete those big things, or if you need to change case statuses or support processes. Also, don't connect your real support email address just yet. So we want to make sure your real cases from customers are just going into one place while you're setting things up in Salesforce, and that one place being desk. So you can definitely test, you can create fake emails going into Service Cloud, and we can talk about how to do that. But in general, don't connect your live support email just yet until you're really ready to go live. So you don't have to worry about where people are answering cases. And then kind of a general question is like, do you actually need to rerun the data migration tool? And so sometimes you don't have to, just depending on what scenario you're in. So in the cases where I don't need to run the tool are, for example, if I don't get a lot of cases and I'm doing everything in one shot, let's say in one day, I pulled the data over first, I set up everything I needed to. Maybe I have a relatively straightforward configuration. I tested, everything looked great. No new cases have gone into desk while I was doing that. No updates to cases have been made, or no significant updates at least have been made that I need to capture and bring over to Salesforce. And then I actually launched the same day with my team. So in those cases, you don't need to rerun the data migration tool. However, if you've maybe been spending a lot of time getting stakeholder buy-in, making sure that the new environment works how you want it to work, and maybe you've done some enhancements, during that time, if it's a couple of days or a couple of weeks, new cases have likely come into your desk site. So that's when you would probably need to rerun the data migration tool. So those are just a couple of things to note there. All right, so let me see. I have a quick question here. I see. Okay, so that data migration part is really, a consideration for you guys. We typically do see a lot of reruns of the data migration tool. So just keep those things in mind. Don't change like the main structure. Do that after all of your data has been brought over. Okay, let's see. So I do want to go through and address any questions that you guys have had. And, the easiest way to do that is probably to unmute you guys. So I don't know if there's a specific person that has a lot of questions that wants to go first, but Nikolai, I've seen you on a couple before. So if that's okay, I'll go ahead and unmute you. Hey, Nikolai, how's it going? And tell me where you are in your data migration kind of setup process.
It's okay, but our company doesn't plan to move anytime soon. It will be in the second half of the year.
Okay,
so
fantastic.
we're not doing anything with that for now.
Okay, great. So you're just kind of collecting information and figuring out everything?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So, and then are you moving into an existing Salesforce site or into a new one?
I think it's existing one, but I have to check with the admins.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, if you do have Salesforce,
we use it for the sales for now. Salesforce.
Got it. Yeah. So Nikolai, if that's the case, typically most people will want to have their sales team and their support team in one place, because the advantage is that all customer information is in one place, and you can even collaborate on cases if the sales team needs to see what's going on with their customers. So that's usually one reason people go into one Salesforce org. But that said, sometimes they want it completely separate. So yeah, definitely talk to your Salesforce admins, figure out which way they want to go, and then depending on that, moving into existing, or you have the instructions on how to move to an existing or to a new one.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Are there any specific questions that you wanted us to cover that we didn't go today? Okay, I guess we answered all the questions then for Nikolai. All right. Okay, so Tim, you got to go. Great, no problem. Thank you for stopping in. If you have any questions, we also have office hours that we run every Friday. So if you have any things that you want to go over, please let us know. Hey, Wes, I'll go ahead and unmute you. Wes, did you have questions that you want us to cover?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. No, I essentially I've been monitoring the presentation. Chad is going to be doing the migration for our company. So
Okay.
I guess there is one question, and just to, at the risk of showing my novice, um, with regard to the sandbox. Can there be multiple sandboxes associated with Salesforce? We are working right now to try and synchronize our ERP with Salesforce and have had a rough go. As we migrate this data in from desk, can we operate in two separate sandboxes, or is that?
Yeah, so I would say you can have multiple sandboxes, yes. But just think of the sandboxes themselves as like independent environments that are different from each other, but also different from your production site. So sounds like you're kind of familiar with the whole sandbox world. Are you an admin on your, or is Chad an admin on the Salesforce side for you guys?
I believe, both have admin on Salesforce.
Okay. Did you want me to just, maybe I'll just unmute Chad as well and we can just have a conversation together since you guys are at the same company.
I mean, that's fine, whatever works for you. But
Okay. So Chad, it looks like you're dialing by the phone. I've sent you the audio pin, which is #53#. If you enter that, it looks like you should be able to unmute yourself and join our conversation. All right, let's see. Hey Chad, I think we should be able to hear you now.
All right.
Hey,
Yeah, so I'm actually an admin on the desk side of things, but I'm not an admin on the Salesforce side of things.
okay, yeah, great. So do you guys know who your Salesforce admin is today?
I suspect that it would be, there are multiples, and I suspect Will Rachels, who is our controller, Chad can connect with Will in that respect. He will need to be an admin, though, to upload or migrate the data, right?
In order to do anything in your actual Salesforce environment, you do need to be an admin. And let me just walk you through the permissions so you guys know and you can talk to your admin about it. So if I go into the setup area and I go to users, I will have a list of all the users that are in the Salesforce in Salesforce for me. And so let me just show you what it looks like. Let me just go into mine. So if I look at my name here, Barb Tassa, I can see my profile as system administrator. So in order to do anything that's involving migrating data, installing tools, really the big stuff, it's kind of like the equivalent of being the billing admin in or the admin in the desk team or the desk site. So you do need to have this profile of system administrator. And a couple things you just need to make sure is like you have that knowledge user and then you have the service cloud user checkbox checked off. So if you're moving into an existing Salesforce site, as I mentioned, depending on if you've signed your contract yet to do the swap, you probably don't have this checked and you may not have this service cloud user checked either. So this is where you just want to work with your admin, make sure you guys have the right profile. Work with your Salesforce admin, especially if you have different sandboxes, figure out which one, maybe they're going to create a new one for you guys. Maybe it's going to be using existing Salesforce to existing sandbox. Typically, it's just a partial sandbox that is an existing one, and they'll do kind of like a snap of what's in production, pull it into the sandbox. So then you're working basically in the live environment configuration. So that way, when you're setting up any rules, if you're migrating any data, you can really see how those things interact with each other. So definitely involve your admin as the first step. Give them an overview of sort of how this all works, because they're probably going to have very strong opinions on what you can do or what you cannot do.
Okay. I am an admin, and what I can do is I can go into the users and I can enable Chad as an admin. I have that ability. Is there any reason why I wouldn't do that?
So I can just tell you, like when we work in our Salesforce, so Salesforce obviously uses Salesforce internally at our company as well, and we have different instances of Salesforce. And generally, like the bigger the company you are, the more controls you have over who can do what in order to like prevent things from being messed up. And not to say that you're not capable, it's just that you can do a lot of configurations in Salesforce, and if you're just not sure of how certain things interact, like there's a bunch of processes that could be running in the background. Maybe there's some validation rules. So if you're actually going to run a data migration, you may need to turn certain things off, or it's going to like create new things. As an example, just for us, so if you've run the data migration tool once, and you're in a live environment, you want to turn, you probably have some processes. Like in our trial org, we have 7 processes that make it easy for people to use Service Cloud. So typically there's processes, maybe workflow rules or validation rules that are already in an existing Salesforce site. And depending on which object they work on, so objects are those kind of like database tables where you store different types of information. So if they act on the case object, for example, or maybe even the contact, you could have something going on in the background. So these are just general best practices to say, hey, Salesforce admin, like this is what we're planning to do. Do you see any issues? Like, are there any configurations that you have that would potentially interact and cause conflict? So you may have things just get triggered that shouldn't be triggered. That's usually the reason why you want to have your admin involved, because they'll probably have a good idea of what is in there and what could cause problems.
Okay.
Yep. So that's the main reason.
We will together collaborate on that.
Excellent. Excellent. Collaboration is key, I think. All right. Do you guys have any other questions in terms of like how to set things up, or anything along those lines that you want to ask before we end today?
Ed?
I'd like to get John Cabrera's email address.
Well, actually, how about this? Contact our support team, because John is probably going to be answering that, but we want to make sure everything goes through our support team. It's right here. So you guys have this deck. It's in the chat notes here, but our email is support@desk.com. So that creates a case for us in our Service Cloud instance, and then John or another member of our team will follow up and help you guys out.
Yeah, I'll definitely get it. So just send anything that you need for me to that address there, support@desk.com. I'm part of the team, so I'll definitely get it.
Sounds good, John. Appreciate it.
Great.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for you guys in joining us today. Hopefully this was helpful. And we do have a quick ask. So if you can, we do have a post-webinar survey. So if you could take a minute to answer those couple questions, we'd really appreciate it. And thanks again for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, have a great rest of the day. Bye for now.
Goodbye.